of fake facts and fake truth. So how does that get navigated?
Yes, absolutely. The fake news is a big, the fake news and the fake facts is a big part of our world now. And, I think that we have to acknowledge that some, not everyone sees the same things. It goes back to what I said, right? We just have to acknowledge that this is how this person sees it, right? And it's not our job to change their mindset. When you're talking about conflict resolution, it's not about changing the other person's perspective in the moment, right? It's about being understanding and acknowledging their position. You can strive to see if you can change the mindset, by having healthy dialogue. But if you get to a point where it's obvious the person's gonna, kind of still believe those fake facts, then what can you do? Your job is not to change them. Our job is to hear each other out and have respectful dialogue. Okay, we'll go to tip number 4. I'm keeping track of time here. Recognize that ignoring or attacking the other person rarely gets you what you really need, right? So this is a 2-part for me. Recognizing first that ignoring or attacking the other person. Ignoring or attacking for me, is that kind of natural reaction to fight or flight, right? When we're confronted with conflict. And there's positives and negatives to kind of both approaches, depending on your style of conflict resolution and depending on your style of communication. We all communicate in different styles too, right? Some of us communicate with a lot of emotion. Some of us are a little bit more restrained. Some of us are very direct, and some of us leave little pieces, for people to pick up. But, so depending on how you manage, ignoring might be helpful for you, right? And if you're the opposite, maybe attacking the situation might be helpful for you. So there's positives, pros and cons for both. If you ignore it, maybe it gives you the time to step back, look at the picture, to be, the greater picture, kind of think through what your next move is going to be. But you have to come back, right? You have to come back, especially if it's an interpersonal conflict, because if it's with someone that you're going to see often, someone that you love, someone that you care for very much, then you're going to lose that connection. You run the risk of losing the connection. So you want to come back at some point, or it's never going to be resolved. Attacking it, well, it all depends on how you attack it, right? Attacking is kind of a negative word. It implies that you're coming high with negative attitude, right? And we all know that doesn't work. But instead of attacking, maybe we can be more direct. We can be firm. We can have healthy dialogue and still be direct and firm. And the second part to this is rarely gets you what you really need. What you really need, right? When we're in conflict, we're going to talk about needs a little bit further down here on the tips. But when we're in conflict, it's really easier for us to communicate our complaints. What's bothering us, right? What you're doing or what the other person is doing that's impacting me. But underneath that complaint, there's an underlying need that's important to you that people aren't getting. And again, we'll talk a little bit more of that, but just recognizing that we have to strategize how we're going to approach the conflict, right? We can ignore, we can attack. Well, there's pros and cons to that. What can we do? Well, again, you can be more aware. You can acknowledge the other person's position. You can strategize about how you're going to approach. Any comments on number 4?
I don't see any.
Okay.
I think we're good.
We'll go to number 5. Do what you can to really listen to the other person. The very basic, right? Do what you really can to listen to the other person. we have a technique at the NCRC that we call respond respectfully. And if you've taken our training, one of our trainings, so we cover this, and we have a whole section and we do an exercise on this. Respond respectfully it can be used when you're being approached about a conflict, a direct conflict with you, or maybe when someone comes and tells you about a conflict as well that they're having. Respond respectfully has 3 pieces, right? And this is the easiest thing that you can do to demonstrate that you're listening to the person. So let's think about this. Someone comes and attacks you about some perceived conflict, or they're going to tell you about a conflict that they're having. The first thing that we want to do is repeat back what you just heard them tell you, right? That's the first R, respond respectfully. So repeat back, because that's going to allow us to make sure that we understood the person, right? Not repeat back every single little snippet that they said, but just a little kind of, paraphrasing to make sure that we understood. The second thing that we want to do when we're responding respectfully is to talk about the impact that the conflict is having on the person. And think about that in a situation where someone's approaching you about a perceived conflict. When someone attacks us, or when we are disagreeing with someone, the first thing we want to do is tell them that they're wrong, right? Or maybe tell them how they should fix the situation. We start shooting them. You know what you should do. Or maybe we make it about us. You know what? That happened to me, and this is what I do. We story top it, right? But a lot of the times we forget that this might be a real conflict that has a real impact on the person. So we want to talk about that, because that's going to make them feel acknowledged. That's going to make them feel like, yes, you understand. You understand not only the conflict, but you understand how it's affecting me, right? Because conflict resolution in our model it's about that. It's about underlying needs. And all of us have that underlying need, basic need to feel accepted, right? And acknowledged and respected. And so talking about the impact of this conflict really puts that person in that position where, okay, I'm talking about this conflict and I'm being heard. And then after you've talked about the impact, so we're talking about, I can imagine how difficult that must have been. I can imagine that's so stressful. I can't believe that you tell me more about that, right? Then the last part that you want to do is talk about underlying needs. Nerlin, I imagine what you wanted in that situation was to feel respected. I imagine that if that person would have just acknowledged your position, it would have changed the whole outcome of that conversation, right? Talking about the need, because when we're in conflict, we're thinking about our hurt, right? We're stuck kind of in the mad or in the sadness. And we're not thinking about what is it that I really want. And so us helping the person respond respectfully helps you help the person really understand what the underlying need of the conflict is. And listening to the other person, really demonstrating, with our best active listening skills, eye contact and positive body language and all that good stuff, is the easiest thing that we can do to show respect towards another person. I'll give you a little example. And it's not about, a political divide, but when I visit my mom, my mom is from a generation that she doesn't care about cell phones. She didn't grow up with one. She doesn't really care about a cell phone, but I'm always stuck to my cell phone. And I hadn't noticed that when I would visit her, I was spending my face was looking a little bit too much down to my screen. And one day my mom told me, daughter, she said, I love you coming here, care so much for you. But if you're going to come to be on your phone, then don't come at all. and she waved her little finger at me. And when she said that to me, it hurt. I felt my little heart break, because in the moment I realized how disrespectful I had been to her. I realized that she was feeling unheard, like she didn't matter, like what I was telling her didn't matter. So really listening, responding respectfully, creates a space where the person feels respected and cared for. I think I saw a message on the chat, maybe. Let me see here.
How can we get a person who's angry and emotional to be able to even identify what's the real reason for their anger?
That's a great question. You respond respectfully, right? So remember, when we're in conflict, we're also we're bringing energy into a conflict, right? And so if you're going to respond with the same energy that the person has, you're not going to hear each other, right? And so I know that I've been in situations where, people might be angry at me or something that I did, or they think I did. The first thing I say is I acknowledge that anger or that frustration. I say, Mary, I can see that this is very important to you, and I can see that this is a very frustrating situation here. I want to hear you out. Let's take the opportunity and sit down and talk about this. This is important. I can see this is very important to you. And then I repeat, and once I ask, tell me what's going on. And then I repeat to make sure that their stated position has been heard and that I understood it. And then I follow up with the impact. Again, I can see that you're very frustrated. I imagine if I would have been in the moment more respectful, or if I would have communicated clearly, or perhaps, I can see, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but also if you acknowledge responsibility in a conflict, that helps you bring people down and be in a position where they want to talk about needs, right? So if I made a mistake in the moment, I say, yes, I can see that I messed up there. You're right, I made a mistake, right? And if we would have communicated better, if I would have communicated better, or, if I would have made, accomplished my piece of the puzzle, then we wouldn't have been in this position. Does that clear that question? Mm-hmm. So respond respectfully. That's a very effective technique to bring people down, to feel heard, to feel acknowledged, and to be able to be ready to talk about needs. Okay, let's go to tip number 5. Ask yourself, how can I say what I want to tell them in a way they can hear it? So how can I say what I want to tell them in a way that they can hear it? So let's think about this. We're having a conversation with someone, right? And it's clear that they're not hearing you because, they're repeating themselves. They're still angry, right? They're stuck in the position. Most of the time I found doing mediations for so long is that if people are repeating themselves or they're still stuck in their position, is because they haven't been acknowledged and they haven't been heard, or at least they feel like they haven't been acknowledged or heard. So if you're having a conflict with someone and you can clearly see that they're not listening to what you're trying to say, think about what can you do in the moment, right? Because it's in the moment. What can I do now to change the way that I'm delivering this information? Well, we can do a couple of things, right? First, we can bring the tone down, right? We can change the vocabulary that we're using, the words that we're using, right? Remember, a lot of the times, what matters most, yes, it's the content, but also how we're delivering that content, right? So bringing it down, using different words, maybe we need a little break, right? You know what? I can see that we're not heading in a positive direction right now. Why don't we take a break?